Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We have Raducanu versus Aryna Sabalenka for round 3 of the Cincinnati Masters. Cannot wait to get into this one because we have had it earlier this year in a very entertaining matchup where Sabalenka won in straight sets, but 2 sets where Raducanu was a breakup in both sets, so had her opportunities and pushed Sabalenka, but in the end, the world number 1 got it done in pretty impressive fashion to weather the storm, that is. Before you do get into it, remember that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Shout out to our members as well. Thank you, everyone, for your support. So as I mentioned that they have played earlier this year, the head-to-head is 2-0 in favour of Aryna. They played once last year as well at Indian Wells, and Sabalenka won 6-3, 7-5. At Wimbledon, it was 7-6, 6-4. Raducanu had set point opportunities in that first set as well, and as I mentioned, she was a breakup in that second set, on top of being a breakup in the first set as well. Keys to victory, how does this one play out? Well, before we get into that, I want to talk very briefly about their matches they've played. Both players were seeded at Cincinnati or in Cincinnati, so it means they didn't have to play round 1. However, it does mean that they had to play at least one match before this round 3 match. And for Sabalenka, it was a very tough match against Marketa Vondrousova, the former Wimbledon champion. I did a preview on this, and I think I picked Sabalenka in 3 sets, potentially. Could have been 2, I'm hoping it was 2, because she did win in 2 sets, 7-5, 6-1. A pretty decent display from Sabalenka. Pounced on the Vondrousova second serve, as she does with any player who has a weaker second serve. Talking of second serves, Raducanu had a very impressive serving display against Danilovic. 7 aces against the Serb, won 6-3, 6-2. Not only did she hit 64% of first serves in, which is very solid, but she won 70% of her first serve points and 92% behind her second serve, which is huge going into that Sabalenka match. Now, yes, Sabalenka is a notch above level-wise when it comes to the comparing Danilovic and Sabalenka, and yes, Sabalenka is a much better second serve returner. But I did notice, we're not talking about night and day here, but we're talking about some incremental improvements that she seems to be making with her new coach, Francesco Roig, who worked with Rafael Nadal as well. And one of the biggest aspects of Nadal's game was not necessarily the serve specifically, but how he backed up his serve, because he didn't have the biggest of serves, and Raducanu also doesn't have the biggest of serves. But how you back up that serve, how you use the serve tactically to then set up that +1 shot and try and get on the front foot and make your opponent feel uncomfortable from ball 1 is really important. And that's something that Raducanu on the first serve tends to be able to do for the most part. But on the second serve, it can be a liability against players like a Sabalenka or a Swiatek or a Raducanu, because they are so clinical and opportunistic when they get any chance to attack a second serve. So I think she was a lot smarter with her second serve tactics in terms of placement, in terms of execution. If she is able to implement that against Aryna Sabalenka and at least make some incremental gains from their Wimbledon matchup, she then puts herself in a really good position given how tight those 2 sets were at Wimbledon. We also will then look at, okay, the serve return dynamic is very important. As I mentioned, the second serve matchup might be slightly better for Raducanu than it was prior to this tournament. Sabalenka is still going to dominate that second serve dynamic, in my opinion. It's just, can Raducanu make it less, can she make it hurt less for her than she did at Wimbledon? Because that's a big plus if she's able to do that. And it will help, because there's other aspects of her game and other aspects of this matchup where she will come out on top when it comes to the dynamic. And one of those will be the first serve return points. I think Raducanu, as I've mentioned in the past, I personally think she is one of the best returners on tour. When I talk about that, I'm talking about top 10 returners on tour. I think she makes a lot of returns into court. She takes the ball early and she does put a lot of pressure on the server. For her, it's going to be important to ensure that Sabalenka doesn't get a lot of free points. Now, on these courts where the conditions are very fast, they're using slightly lighter balls, the regular duty balls, and it's flying through the air and through the court. It's going to be tough for Raducanu in comparison to Wimbledon, because I would say these courts are quicker. Are they better for serving? I mean, I think grass is a better surface generally to serve on than hardcore. With hardcore, you get those very true bounces. So potentially, maybe it evens out with how this is quicker, but the surface is slightly better to return on. Potentially it levels out. And Raducanu returned really well against Sabalenka in that match. So if she can do the same in this one, she puts herself in a really good position. For Sabalenka, I don't think she had the best serving day. She was going wide quite a lot to Raducanu, and it wasn't quite coming off as she probably would have liked. Raducanu was going deep down the middle with the return, which is a really effective return, especially against someone like Sabalenka, who's looking to dictate, stay tight to the baseline. And she was essentially hitting her on her toes a lot of the times. And Sabalenka was struggling to dig it out because it's an extremely hard +1 shot to hit. And if she can nullify and neutralize the power and just the sheer efficiency of the Sabalenka +1 play, that puts her in a really good position to frustrate Sabalenka and create a lot of inroads into those return games. So again, puts her in a really prime position to break. Because of these conditions and the balls, etc. And yes, I think it's very, very important that we mention that Sabalenka is the defending champion here. She's also the defending US Open champion. So when we talk about the balls and the conditions, and yes, in my opinion, I think they suit Raducanu more than Wimbledon. Sabalenka, you could also argue though, is more suited to these conditions than Wimbledon. She has won the US Open. She hasn't won Wimbledon before. She won Cincinnati last year in these same conditions. So what's to say that she cannot play even better than she did Wimbledon? I think that's a fair suggestion to make. But what I will say is that I think both players are more at home in these conditions, in my opinion. But what these conditions bring to the table in this matchup is that Raducanu has better opportunities and more potential to hurt Aryna offensively than, say, a Wimbledon or other surfaces, because of how quick the surface is and the balls specifically. If people remember, she won the US Open, of course, in 2021 with these balls, with these types of conditions. Sabalenka, yes, she's going to be able to hurt Raducanu, and to be honest, anyone on tour in these conditions, but she can also hurt anyone on tour with her hitting level and ability, which is not surface dependent. She's able to hit through players and hit a heavy ball, really hurt the opponent from the baseline especially, and on serve and on return with her power baseline game. Because that's just what she's about. That is how she's able to win matches. That is what she's all about. And she is very effective at doing it on any surface, whether it's slow or medium or fast paced, or whether it's on clay or grass or hardcore. And that's why she's had success on all three surfaces. Maybe not at Grand Slams yet, but in all tournaments that are excluding Grand Slams, she has won Masters 1000 tournaments, apart from grass, because they don't have a Masters 1000 tournament. What could be quite key in this matchup, and probably won't be as effective in these conditions as it would have been on grass, is the variety. And what I will say is that the Raducanu backhand slice could be quite effective against Sabalenka. I think it's also worth noting that, say, the forehand lob or backhand lob is also an effective tool. We saw, for example, when Djokovic, and this is an ATP example, but when Djokovic and Alcaraz played in Cincinnati 2 years back now, it would have been, in the final, both players utilizing that backhand lob at times. Because of the conditions and the balls, etc., if you are able to hit a very effective high topspin backhand lob or forehand lob into a pretty good area, you are going to push that player back. The conditions are very hot and humid in Cincinnati for what I've seen. It does mean you're going to get a bit of extra pop and bounce as well. So we're talking about some very interesting conditions that Raducanu could take advantage of. The slice is maybe not going to be as effective because it's probably going to sit up. But if you can really hit a knife slice, then it's worth hitting. And what I noticed with Raducanu is utilizing angles a lot. And I think that's going to be really crucial against someone like Aryna Sabalenka. I think trying to hit through her is not enough, and you're not going to win that type of plan or game even. Where she may be able to win the matchup is by utilizing angles, shorter angles, and dragging Sabalenka around, because she is now one of the better athletes on tour, no doubt, but she's still not, in my opinion, an elite mover like a Swiatek or a Goff. And I would argue that actually Raducanu moves better and defends better out of the corners than Sabalenka currently anyway. That's kind of how I view it. In terms of prediction, it's a tough one because I think I would normally go pretty comfortably with Sabalenka. But there's something about the way that Raducanu has been playing that gives me a little bit of faith that she could potentially win this. Now, I don't think I picked her when I did my bracket for the WTA Tour Cincinnati draw. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say Raducanu in straight sets. And that's a pretty big call, and I could have a lot of egg on my face when I look back on this video tomorrow, but that I have a interesting feeling that could be the case. And I think maybe the stars might align a little bit. I think the second serve dynamic is quite important. The new coach, a new lease of life. She's been playing well anyway for the last few months. She was very close to beating Sabalenka at Wimbledon. She'll take a lot of confidence from that going into this one as well. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below what you think and why. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you in the next video.